can admire the artwork on this piece. And more important, it's very costly, very expensive to make this. So it's like a status symbol, to show the of southern Chile, and they're interesting for a number of reasons, but the ones I want to point out to you are these pieces: the drum, the beater, the thing that you beat the drum with. This is a kind of a fife or a whistle, and this is a headpiece that's worn by the person who would play all of these. The Mapuche have a particular ceremony in which they summon the spirits to either answer a question or to do something for them, and in order to do that, the person who leads the ceremony is a woman who is, what would we call her? We would call her a shaman or something like that, and she dances and plays that drum and plays the whistle and wears that headdress during this ceremony. So these are pieces that date from about 100 years ago, but the ceremony still is conducted to this day, which is made. So it's made by the Caiapó people of central Brazil, from the Mato Grosso area, central Brazil. The Caiapó are they see themselves as protectors of the rainforest, and they have done things like fought miners and fought the lumbermen and fought the farmers in court and in real, with weapons to try to protect the rainforest. They also have a feeling of special connection to birds, and so a lot of this stuff has to do with birds. These particular feathers on this headdress come from a bird called an arara, which is like a parrot or a macaw, and the headdress is made for what's called the naming ceremony. I hope you're not recording my voice.
No.
When children are born into the Caiapó, they get a number of names of their ancestors. But at some point when they're about 7 or 8 years old, they have to take one name and to be known for the rest of their life. So there's a big ceremony with dancing and singing and feasting and so on. And the children who are going to take on the name, they're the ones who get to wear these huge headdresses as part of the ceremony. So really beautiful. It comes from the Kerala coast of India, the southeast coast of India. It's made out of a single piece of very fine cotton, and it shows in the design, the main design is called the Tree of Life. If you look at the blossoms on the tree, you'll see they're different from one. Each one's different from the others. So it's not meant to be a real tree, like a live tree, but a kind of statement of life and how life comes. It's got birds, it's got animals, it's got so all kinds of other little flowers of various sorts. And the way that this is made is kind of interesting and very complicated. The idea is to use what's called resist dyeing, which means that you draw the design on the plain fabric. You then cover up the areas you do not want to color. So you then, with wax or something like wax, it then goes into the dye, it comes out, it dries, the wax comes off, and wax gets put on a different part of the fabric, and it's then dyed in another color. Or maybe as a bedspread or a covering for a couch or something like that to show off the wealth of the individual. Now, of 2,600 years ago, and very brightly painted. The paints were, when it was made, were very, very vibrant, but over the years have faded somewhat. And most of the designs have to do with the afterlife. So there's sort of religious figures, but here and there in various places are hieroglyphs. Anybody read hieroglyphs?
No, we could.
Not yet.
Me too. Anyway, in several places on the container are the name of the person who was buried in it. And here he is. This is his name is Antjou, and he was a wealthy landowner, maybe a merchant in Egypt 2,600 years ago when he died. And his family was wealthy enough that they could have him mummified and put into this very expensive container. Yes, sir.
I can notice he's not.
The piece, when it was finished, got a covering of white paint or some kind of chalky paint, and then it was painted with all of these bright figures and also some hieroglyphs here. These are the original paints. This has not been repainted, just the piece has been cleaned, but never repainted. It's 2,900 years old. And it contains the mummified body of this woman right here. Her name is Jed Ma'atasunk, and she was a singer or something like that in a temple in southern Egypt 2,900 years ago when she died. And here she is shown being led by the hand to be introduced to Osiris, who is the guardian of the underworld. So she is being admitted into the afterlife.
Wow.
Now, a lot is known about her from the designs on the outside, but one evening, 15 years ago or so, she was put into an ambulance and taken to Sick Children's Hospital and put through a CAT scan, a CT scan, like basically an X-ray. And a lot was found out about her then. For example, that she's buried with a big gold amulet over her heart. She was a woman of maybe 30 or 35 years of age when she died, and she had never had children. And for a woman of that age, 29, a married woman, she was married, it was very unusual that she didn't have children. And the other thing that was discovered of interest from this CT scan was that she died of an abscessed tooth.
Oh, okay.
The teeth, and you can see it on Antjou, the teeth that to live that kind of life. She was the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty. She was unlike her predecessors who didn't speak Arabic, or Egyptian if you want to call it that. I guess it was still Egyptian. She spoke several languages, including Phoenician and the Egyptian and some Latin, because she managed to hook up with Julius Caesar and with Mark Antony. And one of the questions we often ask is, was she really beautiful? You know, we have movies, look, Elizabeth Taylor and people like that. And here in this statue, which I'll tell you about in just a second, she looks pretty nice too. But there are coins, Roman coins, that show her to be really ugly.
Okay.
So the question is, how did she manage to get Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, two of the most powerful men in Rome? How did she manage to seduce them? Well, we don't know. But it's also the case that she probably commissioned these. This would have had a snake, which is a symbol of power in Egypt, she's obviously, really quite beautiful. She's got this Egyptian style of hair, not the Roman style. It's really kind of an interesting piece. For a long time, the museum didn't know that this was Cleopatra, but it was about 15 years ago or such, 20 years ago, the curator found information that leads us to believe, to know that this is the statue of Cleopatra. But again, whether she commissioned this statue and wanted herself to look like that, who knows? Now I'm going to show you another statue without portrait busts to be sent out to different parts of the empire to show what he wanted people to think he looked like. He thought he was the handsomest man in Rome.
Okay.
And so he shows himself here with this massive, beautiful hair and nose and that military outfit to show what a powerful guy he was. Of course, nobody knows what he really looked like because there were no photographs, there were no TV, no nothing, no way of knowing for sure what he looked like. But here he is, you know, Mr. Handsome. He was not, it turns out, the sort of the plainest person, let's just say. He was really quite a character. He liked to gamble. He was a very bad gambler. He was a womanizer. He was a drunk. He liked to drink alcohol a lot, and he had built next to his house a little tavern, so he and his friends could drink into the night, and if he got drunk, they would just carry him up to his bedroom, and the public would never know. He took over as emperor when this guy died. Okay, I'll tell you the story. Her name Faustina, who was known as Faustina the Younger. Faustina was married to Antoninus Pius, who was the emperor of Rome, but they didn't have a male heir. They didn't have a son. So they adopted Lucius Verus. When he was an adult, he was a late teenager when he was adopted. It was not unusual. But then somebody asked her and Antoninus Pius to adopt another young man, and that was Marcus Aurelius. And they adopted them so that Antoninus Pius would have a male heir as emperor. Their daughter, Faustina the Younger, Faustina the Younger, this is her right here. This is with, looks like a clamshell she's wearing. She married Lucius Verus.
Yeah, one of them is Julius Caesar.
We're not going to be able to get into that today. The Greek galleries are sort of just around the corner down that way. But what I wanted to draw your attention to was this little piece right here. This was found somewhere in the Cyclades, which are islands to the south of Greece in the Aegean Sea, and it is at least 4,000, probably closer to 5,000 years old, this little piece. You can see that it depicts a woman. It has, the figure has breasts. It looks like showing the groin area, so clearly or apparently a woman. And these figures, many of them, like this, maybe not quite as beautiful as this one, all have these oblong heads with a little nose, no eyes on them, arms crossed on their abdomen, usually the left over the right, for whatever reason, and knees bent. And it would have been found lying down. You know, it's propped up here so that you can see the details. Nobody seems to know what this figure represents. The general thinking is that it represents a fertility figure, maybe ugly. They were thought to be primitive. They were thought to be really pretty, plain and stupid. But a number of artists looked at them and said, wait a second, this is really very interesting, including people like Pablo Picasso and John Arp and a number of other European artists of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And what they did, if you look at some of their paintings, you will see that roughly that kind of depiction. So not only were these figures powerful in the sense that people worshiped them and asked them for favors, but also powerful in the sense that they influenced European art.
Can I make an
Made out of naturally colored stone. Their pieces have been cut by people who know what they're doing and made into these designs that would have been admired on the floor of these various villas. And what I want to draw your attention to is this piece, which, is faded. The colors have faded somewhat, but it has two Greek words at the top. One is trife, the other one is bios, means pleasure and life. Feeling really good. His arm is resting on a dolphin-shaped armrest here. He's sitting on a nice couch, and sitting in his lap is this pretty woman. She used to buy there, but they used to be colored stones there, but over the years they sort of disappeared. And she is just sitting nicely on his lap, and he's holding an amulet, a kind of wishing wheel to make a wish. So what's he doing? They were doing all kinds of things. And so they went under a waterfall to bathe. They took off their clothes and went under a waterfall to bathe. At the same time, there was another hunting party in the same woods, but this time was a bunch of guys, just a bunch of guys. One of them got lost. He was riding along on his horse, and he realized that Diana was underneath this waterfall, and he saw her. So she got very angry. They weren't supposed to see a goddess like that. And she got very angry with him. She didn't know he was lost. She thought he'd come to look at her. So she set his hunting dogs. She got his hunting dogs to jump on him and rip him to pieces. It's not exactly a children's story.
No, exactly.
But not finished yet. Another important feature of this is this thing right here. Can you tell what that is?
Like a key, maybe?
It's exactly what it is. It's a key that winds up a mechanism in the base of this figure, and if you put it on a table and wind it up, it will move down the table. It works, doesn't move in a straight line, it just sort of skitters down the table. So if you were a rich person and you had a big long table, you would put it at one end, you'd wind it up, and go down the table.